In this lesson, we're going to be looking at something called utility software. Now, we've already looked at operating systems, and if you remember, the operating system is responsible for managing software and hardware inside the computer. Now, when we are naming two types of software, the two main types are system software, which is, for example, the operating system, but also the system startup software that can be found in ROM, as well as application software. Now, application software is a kind of software used on a day-to-day basis. For example, this will include Microsoft Word, PowerPoint, and things like that. So we're going to be looking at the purpose of utility system software. And again, that word system software. System software is software which is used to help the system, i.e. the computer, run smoothly. The main system software which we have looked at have been the startup software, which allows the computer to start up and to be configured, the operating system, which I've already mentioned, and as well as utility software, which we're about to look at. So, as previously stated, there are two types of software: system software and application. System software includes the operating system and utility. So remember, in order for the computer to work, we do need system software. So we need software which will allow you to communicate with the devices, for example, using device drivers. We need something which will allow us to maintain a system, which is utility software, which we're about to look at, as well as making sure that when we first switch the computer on, it will boot up correctly and start the operating system off, which is the startup software found inside ROM. Application software is what we are much more used to, and we tend to shorten it to the word app nowadays. So on your mobile phones, you're going to have apps, as well as on the desktop, you will also have apps or applications. So things like web browsers, word processors, spreadsheets, all those kind of things are applications. In fact, most things you use on a computer will be application software. So utility software, as we've already said, is a type of system software, software which enables us to maintain the system. So there are a wide range of utility software, and thankfully you don't have to know about every single possible utility piece of software that exists. What you do need to know is that it is considered system software and it has a specific purpose. Okay, it doesn't do something generic like Word might do, where you can write a letter, you can write a menu, a recipe, you can make a poster. You know, it's got one purpose and one purpose only. Okay, so there are a number of utilities that you need to be aware of. So encryption, disk defragmentation, data compression, backup. And we're going to kind of look at all those individual ones in this lesson. So encryption is one of the more useful ones. So it is quite common for people to encrypt sensitive files on their computer. For example, let's say you've got a spreadsheet with all your financial data into it, and you're not planning to send that across the internet. However, you don't want anybody just to come along on your computer and be able to look inside it. So you may encrypt it by taking the file, coming up with a key, and or in this case maybe a password, and then encrypting it so if somebody did start to read it without that key, without that password, they would not be able to actually make sense of it. So if you remember, encryption is where we'll take plain text or basically a message, a file, whatever it happens to be, and then using a key, actually apply an algorithm, a cipher, which will hide all the information. So if anybody reads it without that key and not knowing the cipher as well, they would just not be able to make heads or tails of it. Okay, so data inside a computer is encrypted when it's stored and it's a sensitive file, or maybe when we send it over the network. For example, if I'm sending my credit card details over the internet, I'm going to use a website with HTTPS. Now remember, from a previous lesson, HTTPS stands for Hypertext Transfer Protocol, secured, okay? And that uses encryption to hide your credit card details, your email address, your passwords, whatever, over the internet, okay? It's the same principle, same idea. The idea behind it is to prevent unauthorized users. So if a user who manages to intercept your file over the internet or over a network, or gets access to your laptop and starts to look at that file with their financial information in, they won't be able to read it properly without that key. Now, defragmentation is a little bit different. It's something that maybe we're not so familiar with. So starting off with, the idea is that on your storage devices, on your secondary storage devices, you will have your files stored. Now, over time, these files get placed in different parts of the disk, and eventually, instead of storing them in one nice long continuous block, they get split up a little bit. Okay, when a file gets split up and placed over in different parts of the hard drive, we call that fragmentation. Okay, the word fragment means break apart. So effectively, we've got a file which has been broken up into parts and placed on different parts of the disk. The reason this happens is because over time, our hard drives fill up. Okay, we can't just use all this empty space, and eventually we have to start reusing space. And it's when we start reusing the space, that's when we might have an empty space, but isn't big enough for the file we want to put in it. So we put part of the file there, and then part of the other file elsewhere. So a fragmented file is one which is spread, broken up, and spread across the disk. Now this slows down the computer, okay? Specifically slows down magnetic hard drives. And the reason for that is because when a disk spins around, if it's in a nice continuous block, the disk will spin around and the head will kind of read it in one nice little groove, a bit like a record player. It will play the music in one nice smooth motion. If it's spread around the disk, okay, it has to kind of go to one part, read that bit, go to the next part, read that bit, and there's a delay in actually getting from one part to the other, okay, and that slows down the computer. And remember, storage devices are the slowest device that you tend to use on a regular basis. Ergo, that is bad. So a defragmenting tool will essentially put all these files back together again. Okay, or move files around, move these blocks around, and try and place them back into one nice clean line, effectively. Okay, put that file back together to speed up access for that file. So, as we said, this defragment is the opposite. So, as you see on the left-hand side, we have got here a fragmented disk. Now, the fragmented disk is got a file which is broken into 4 parts. So imagine this is block 1, 2, and 3, and 4. Okay. Now I would have to start reading here. Okay. So maybe if I do it like this. So imagine I've got a read head, which is this highlighted line, and the disk is spinning, and the disk is maybe spinning around in this direction. Okay, sorry for the quality of my lines there. But the disk is spinning, so it reads 1 first, and then there's a gap. So this gap here is time wasted. You know, the disk can't jump, it has to just turn. Yeah, it's like a wheel, it just turns all the way around. So there's a little gap, it reads this one next. Okay, brilliant. Now the read head has to kind of move from here to here, and because of that there's another little delay, and then it has to have another delay here, go from there to there, and then finally read the 4th one. So basically when there's gaps in the file and as files spread around, it can cause delay. In fact, it can be a lot worse now. That's actually quite an okay fragment. On the next one, you can see the file is all in one place. So if we have the read head again, I'll do it in green this time. I'm not sure why I'm changing colours, but there you go. And the read head will move around. Okay, so it's going again in the same direction. And what happens is it will read that, then the next one, then the next one, then the next one, and there's no delay. Okay, so as you can see, the one on the right hand side will read faster than the one on the left, basically. Now, data compression is used all across computer science, okay, but it's also used to compress your files effectively. So, if you have some files which maybe don't use very often, or you are really low on storage space on your computer, you can compress the files down. And what this does is it will take parts out of it, you know, it scrunch it down, apply algorithms, so the file is smaller. Okay. Now, when we use data compression, when we are compressing normal files like Word documents, stuff like that, we'll use lossless compression. Okay, lossless is where we don't lose information when we compress it, make it smaller, and we can get back to the original file when we decompress it. Okay, remember lossy is reverse to that. So it's very useful because it helps free up storage space so I can store more files. Okay. Backup is something everybody should do. So for example, I've literally just backed up all of the students' data, specifically student files. So I have something to A, work on at home, but B, just in case something happens with files in school, I've got a copy of it. So data backup is the result of copying files and folders for the purpose of restoring it later, just in case something goes wrong. Okay, so if a file gets deleted by accident or gets changed, updated, or the hard drives fail for whatever reason, we won't be able to access those files anymore. Okay, they're gone, and without backup, they will be gone forever. Okay, a backup allows me to kind of go to backup and basically replace it. Backups really should be done on a separate computer. Okay, so they'll be stored on a completely different computer, different set of hard drives or magnetic tapes or whatever medium you choose to use. So there are two types of backups that you can do. Okay, so the first one is what's called a full backup, and a full backup is where it copies the entirety of all the files all at once. Done. Really simple. The other one, incremental, what it'll do is it'll look at the backup that you've been made maybe in the past, look at what files have changed since then, and only copy those ones over. Now, hopefully, it's fairly obvious that an incremental backup will be a lot faster because it's just looking for changed files and not all files. Okay, so if you've got maybe 40, 50, 60 gigabytes of files and only maybe 5 meg of those has changed, well, what's the point of copying over 60 gigabytes? You might as well just copy over those 5 megabytes. Okay, so that's an incremental backup. We copy over the changes, not the entire thing. So now it's time to do a little bit of notes task. Okay, so using OneNote, as we always do, you need to basically describe what utility software is. Okay, this idea is system software. You must make sure inside your notes you would talk about system software. You then need to talk about the 4 types and explain them. Now, your textbooks on page 47 will go through that in a little bit more detail for you, and you can use that when you are creating your notes, okay? On top of that, there's a link on the screen here. If you type that out, you should be taken to BC Bite Size, which will go over that again, so you've got another source of information, okay? I would strongly suggest you read first and then make your notes second, okay? If you're making notes first, then I would strongly suggest you check over and read it and just check your notes are correct, okay? Utility software, although it is quite very simple, although there's not much to it, it does come up on a regular basis, okay? So do make sure you go over it and you understand the term utility.